Hello. Well, I'm gonna try to see if I can find out where the link is. So in case anybody happens to catch this, can feel free to jump in. Let's see, where do I find it? Where is it hiding? Hmm. Where did I find it last time? Hmm. Oh, here we go. I found it. All right, there is the link in case you want to join me. Give me 1 second here. Let's see. 1 sec. Let's see here. All right. Well, let's see. Sorry for the pause there. I was just trying to get the link to show up in case anybody is on about and catches this and wants to join the conversation. Um, so what are people talking about? Well, I guess it's kind of hard to. Nah. Well, no, I guess I won't go into the whole tribal this camp, that camp when it comes to denominations or no one is saved unless you belong to fill in the blank. But we are living in unique times, I suppose, as far as our technology goes. Social media has, and the smartphone has been able to give us the internet and connection and podcast. So when it comes to the age of mass distraction, I guess that is something to take take a minute to understand what is it doing to me in a way. Is it shaping me? Is it affecting me? Is it affecting my approach, my everyday? Um, I'll give you an example. When I wake up in the morning and I get ready to go to work, has that changed any prior to the smartphone, prior to social networks, Robert? You know, I mean, the answer would be yes. I guess it has affected me in some way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, I this morning I was able to catch some. I didn't participate, but I listened to a few live streams, and they were really early because I wasn't able to. I only was able to catch the tail end of that stream, and what it was is people getting ready to go to work, and they were doing a live stream, hosting it or participating in the live stream before they actually went to work, and so yeah, I guess it has affected us in some way, shape, or form, and now has. I do remember. I guess if I can compare it to something that I'm familiar with, based on my experiences, I do remember um, a episode in time where I actually had college roommates, and I was living in a dorm. Me and my best friend at the time, or one of my best friends. I had a few close friends, um, and we decided to get an apartment, student apartment, after the fact. and with my other friend, and we ended up being roommates with other people that were at the time strangers, became our friends. But and so talking to them before you head out anywhere, talking to them before you go to class, talking to them before you go to school. I guess whatever they mentioned does have um, it could affect you as far as uplifting you, or maybe I don't know if you get into an argument. I guess I can start off your day a little bit, you know, worse off if you know if you feel irritable based on the argument and you let that bleed into your work area. They do say, or they recommend, to leave home at home before you go to work, and vice versa, to leave work at work before you go home. But every now and then, I guess people do have a harder time disengaging from that. And with social networks and our um, technologies, the live stream, I guess that also has um, the ability to do that. And so uh, I see Claire. I'm new to here, so if you want to jump in, I do have the link provided. I'm just gonna mention something about how are how are we being affected with our modern technology. I was giving the example of when I was back a while back ago, when I had a dorm life, student apartment life, where I would talk with people before we headed out anywhere. That had the ability to influence us in a good way, bad way. And then I did mention that certain things um, could um, we have a hard time sometimes disengaging, shutting off our mind, especially when we are in some kind of disagreement, argument type of thing. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to talk about, Claire? Um, if not, I guess I'll just keep on. What can I say? Just mention a few things in case any of these kind of trigger your curiosity as far as what to talk about. There's a few things that are broad based that it doesn't, because I don't really want to do the tribal thing like this camp, that camp, dogma. Um, but when it comes to human experience, so universalities, I guess it's more of a um, well, so part of where we're going with our current state of things with technology is there's the youth are trying to adapt with the lack of engagement in everyday conversations, and so they have a fear of public spaces. Um, they have um, even trying to get a job. They have fear of going to a job interview, and then they kind of freak out at a job interview, and then they kind of don't want to go to the next job interview, so they kind of opt out of getting a job when they're when they're young enough and they can't quite get a job yet, so they're like, I don't really need this. So let's see, what did Claire says? Glenn Scrivener's stream about Protestantism. I did caught a, a brief. I did catch that video that he showed um, this morning. If you want to, do you? I don't know if you already clicked on the link. Oh, there you are. I see. Let me. There we are. Can you hear me?
Hi, Alex. Yes, I can hear you
Hello.
very
How are
well.
you?
I'm well. It's been a busy day of listening to streams, and I saw you were listening to OG Rose
I
as
started
well.
catching that
You
the
commented it.
survival versus thriving.
I've been disabled from commenting already.
Oh, on that stream over
I
there.
yeah. I don't think I would. Maybe I've already been. Maybe it was for something else that I did. Months
Okay.
ago. But
Well, I do want to hear your what was some takeaways when you started hearing that conversation? What was some things that grabbed you or things you want to comment on?
yeah, because people tend to delete my comments, I, kind of try to preserve them. I don't think they were, particularly rude. Um, so at minute 6, I know Megan was talking about true death, and I said, true death is the death of your society, nation, empire, civilization. And then in minute 9, I said the latest buzzword seems to be embodiment, which keeps popping up, which I find really annoying because it doesn't seem to add anything. And then Shari was talking about her hallucinations, and then I said, well, I've hallucinated many years ago when I was waiting for a train, and it was all the trains were going to a particular destination on a branch that I didn't want to go, and then I actually hallucinated that the train that had just arrived on the platform was going to where I wanted it to go, and it didn't. But I so wanted it to go, to the destination that I wanted it to go, that I boarded, thinking it was, the train that I wanted. And it did, and then I realized it wasn't. So I had to get off, and then I had to come back again. And the train still hadn't arrived because I was talking to this young man who said, well, I don't know why you got onto that train, because I know you wanted the same train as me. And I said, yeah. And because I thought it said it was going to this destination. He said no, it was going. But anyway, I can see that if you really, really, really want something, you can actually hallucinate, because you want it so much that you make yourself think that it is your train, when in fact it was another destination. So that was what I said. And then I guess, finally I said, it's not a conversation at all. It's just women talking, because, it's like, you speak and I speak, and it's not even related to what you just said before. And I find these
Mm.
conversations really, really, really annoying. It's like, I said something, you can, if you don't understand, ask me a question, or disagree with me, or agree with me. Don't just talk about something else that has nothing to do
Right.
with what it's so annoying. But anyway, I
Well,
guess this is how women talk. They don't want to
uh,
disagree with each other, so they just take turns.
well, I like I said, I I have listened to a lot of difficult conversations in real life, so not on the internet. And I've heard a lot of questions, given a lot of questions, um, and so questions don't really scare me, so to speak. Um, and as far as the ideas don't scare me either. I there's some things that I still don't know, and the only way I'm going to learn something is either I read something that I don't know, or I hear someone that knows something that I do not know. So that's a way of increasing, your experience via knowledge. So you did mention the train as far as maybe I don't want to say an imaginary thing, but more like a hallucination where you actually saw it or you thought you saw it, and it ended up not being there. But whether it's in our mind's eye, so when we start to imagine things, or when we actually hallucinate things and other people don't see it, right? So if I'm picturing something, if I'm imagining something, another person won't be able to see it. Same thing with a hallucination. But you did mention the train, and I am curious because trains have a particular um, you can use the train as a metaphor, and we're I guess some young bucks they kind of lose the notion of what a train is because they never really rode on a train. I've
Okay.
had the experience to actually ride a train, so I find it when I hear it, I do know what it is and how different it is from a car. A car gives you a lot more freedom, and
Yes.
a train does not. A train, it has a set destination, and it has some stops, kind of like a bus, before it
Mm.
gets to your destination based on the ticket that you purchased. But once you board it, you kind of lose control as far as where to go. And if you change your mind, let's say you're heading west and then you want to go east now, or you want to go north, you kind of have to wait until the train stops at the next station and then make do then. A lot less freedom from a car. So when it comes to the
Mhm.
metaphor, a train metaphor is pretty significant, and I tend to use that often when I talk to people that have a problem with control or lack of control. My personal experience is alcohol. When I was young, that's one thing that kind of grabbed me and didn't let me go, and so I did had a hard time letting go of its control over me, and made
Mhm.
a lot of mistakes from alcohol. And
Mhm.
usually, what I came to realize is kind of like deciding to drink is like deciding to get on a train. You have to understand that once you're on it, and you don't really have as much control as you would like to think. And most often than not, it takes you to a place where I would have to say that the majority of the time, it took me to a place I didn't want to go. And even after I knew it was going to take me there, I still decided to get on the train,
Mhm.
thinking I was going to be able to steer whenever I wanted to.
Yes, I think a lot of it is a spiritual emptiness. Yesterday, in one of my streams, I was saying, I remember there was a time when I was smoking a cigarette and thinking, I want, I should light up now. That was years ago, but obviously, if I was already smoking a cigarette and it obviously wasn't having the required effect because I was thinking I should, I sort of absentmindedly thought I need to smoke a cigarette when in fact I was already smoking a cigarette. And also there was a time when I remember thinking I should turn the radio on, and the radio was already on, but obviously it was boring for me and it didn't hit the spot that I wanted. It I wasn't being entertained. So I think it, all these behavioral addictions is to do with our own unhappiness and spiritual void. And you know and we think drugs is a distraction, or gambling, or something harmful to us could be the distraction. And I guess the law doesn't really protect us from it, because it seems the government is encouraging us to drink and take drugs and gamble and basically destroy our lives. And I think this causes even more cognitive dissonance, because we think, well, the government should be looking after us instead of telling us to, die childless, gay, and transgender, which is kind of what they're telling us to do with their
Yeah.
policies of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yes. And you are right. So here in the States, we do have a body of laws. We call it law and order. There's federal laws, there's local laws, state laws, and then even local laws, depending on the county. And well, they're, and I'm glad that they're not so overbearing to the point where, I mean, if we do a thought experiment, um, let's say, let's say we think, what, I want them to have more control over us, to put down more laws and enforce more laws. And let's say they decide to pass new laws, and then all of a suddenly, thought experiment, all of a suddenly they say, you know what, there's too much crime, too much misbehaving, so curfew is 7 p.m. even before the sun goes down, and and also what you wear is going to be enforced. So um, all of a suddenly nobody likes the color orange, so any orange shirts, orange hats, orange jackets, orange shoes, and green, and let's say purple too, what the heck, let's just, I mean, if they start passing ridiculous things. Oh, and also conversations about, let's see, pick anything. Let's say about bushes, plants. That's
Mhm.
We don't like that. So no more conversations. If we catch you in public talking about trees, bushes, I mean, these sound ridiculous, right? But that would be, I think, overbearing. That's going too far. So in a sense, when I push it to the extreme, and it starts to sound absurd that they're now encroaching into my everyday life, and what business does the government have, whether I decide to talk about plants and trees, or wear purple, or wear orange hat, you know what I mean? It's like, what businesses of, and if I want to be out barbecuing at 8 p.m. after the curfew, you know what I mean? So I am glad that they're not, that we have freedoms to a degree. But what we, and this is my personal take here, so opinion based. um, I do think that we have lost the ability to give sound advice to friends, family, siblings, kids, what I mean? And to the point where, I'll give you some
I
specifics.
think parents are afraid of their children. I think that's
And
the bottom line.
yeah, and I'll give you some specifics, Claire. So, the whole concept that we're not willing to acknowledge boredom, because we have so many things to keep us distracted, that nobody, or so it seems from my point of view, nobody wants to sit with boredom. They go, as a metaphor, they go crazy if they have to experience some kind of boredom. Um, Also, because we're distracted and we're trying to not be bored, even for 5 seconds, like, I don't have nothing to do. So we're on our phones, or we're playing a game, we're doing something at all times. It gets to the point where we don't even see that that has become a problem from my point of view. And the other thing is about having control over our urges. So I'm going to throw the word out there, like temptation. And um, again, boredom, distraction, temptation all seem to be of the same, um, how can I say, all in the same family house, sort of, um, because all these things have to do with us having to choose something worthwhile versus something just to pass the time because we're bored. And sometimes we when we want to, when we talk to people, friends, people that are actually close friends of ours, like a sibling, like a best friend, and if we see them destroying themselves or about to make a bad decision, we, in my opinion, have lost the ability to give sound advice as far as, um, you know, I'm concerned because of the choice you want to make, because it seems like it's going to wreak havoc on your life, or it's going to end up bad based on past experiences, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it all goes down to our inability to see, or to actually, because we don't want, remember, a disagreement, we don't want a confrontation, we don't want to give sound advice. And it all is, as far as those value judgments, as far as, should you really be playing video games 10 hours a day? I mean,
Well,
is it a good
it's the
thing?
issue of parental authority, isn't it? Ultimately, we're talking about hierarchy, and traditional values was really about parental authority, and now, I suppose, parents fear that their kid might call childline or whatever it's called in America, and they seem to be encouraged to do it at school, and what are parents for if we're just sort of rearing them for the government to corrupt their minds when they go to university and turn them against us with all their weapon words, calling us all kinds of names. So I think there is a real problem about even advising our children. And I noticed that liberal parents would say things like, "Oh, you have to let them make their own mistakes." And it's like, no, no, they only have one life. Do you want them to make the mistake of getting themselves knocked up if they're our daughter, getting
Right.
addicted to drugs and drink, So okay, but then we sort of know that they might not listen to us, right? And the thing is, you have discharged your duty if you tell them. And it's like it's okay, you said the thing that you took that you said, and they got angry and they got up and went out of the room and slammed the door. It's like, yeah, okay, but you told them, right? And they heard, and that was why they were angry, and they obviously understood, and that was why they were angry, and then they walked out and slammed the door. It's like, well, I told them. I can't make them listen because they're adults, but at least I told them. I think that's the only way we can discharge our duty. To say, I told you so. I know people say, oh, but people hate you telling them. But it's like, well, if you didn't tell them so, you don't even have the moral authority to say you told them so. And you're actually in a worse position because they might say, well, why didn't you tell us? You could have said something, but you didn't, you know.
Yeah, and something. I think this has to do with we we lost the notion of the expectations. What is a parent expected to do? So what is the role of the parent? And my whole world did change. It's changed several times, but one of the big changes was when I became a parent and when I find out that my kid doesn't know anything. He doesn't know how to walk, talk, how to run, how to ride a bike. It doesn't know how to, the kid doesn't know how to swim. And quickly I had to, and then having to teach the kids boundaries, right? Because, you know, they want to eat ice cream all day, every day, right? They want to play games instead
Mm,
of sit down to have a dinner, to have lunch at the dinner table. But and I credit this to my wife because she's more thorough than, not thorough, that's not the right word. She enforces the boundaries a lot more thoroughly than I do. And
mm,
when we talked about it, she did say, we agreed that the expectation is that when we were going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that we were going to eat together at the table, at the dinner table, together as a family. And that's what we were. And so, remember, our kids didn't know anything. They didn't know how to talk. So from early on, they thought it was normal to eat at the dinner table because that's what we expected, and that's what we kept doing over and over and over. And when they wanted to deviate
mhm,
from that, they just wanted to go eat in the living room or on the floor or whatever. We're like, no, 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 that's not what we want. That's not how it's done. This is how, and so we, again, it's something that we learned through other parents and through books, that so the parent are the ones that are expected to set the rules and the boundaries. So if we gave in, it would be the kids that said, nope, we're not having dinner at the dinner table. Or if the parents enforced and kept enforcing those expectations, we would continue to have dinner at the dinner tables. My wife wanted our kids to have chores, and so from early on, my daughter and my son, they had chores that they all had to do, and on a daily basis. And did they do it? Yes. Was it done really bad? Yes. So we would have to redo it after they were done. But my wife is like, it's not the point that they do it right. The point is that they're expected to do it, and it becomes routine, and it becomes something they do every day.
mhm,
Fast forward, fast forward 5, 10 years, they're actually able to do their chores and do it properly, and they're expected
mhm,
to do. So they're not fighting us because it's just something we do every day.
mhm,
But but we have, by and large, we have lost the ability to set proper boundaries and proper expectations as parents.
mhm,
And so the question, Claire, is, by and large, in the community or in the state or in the nation, who, or what do most parents think? Who is really raising our kids? Are the teachers raising our kids? The babysitter raising our kids when we go off to work? Who is really setting those expectations?
Well, I think the standards have lowered because unmarried parenthood, unmarried motherhood in
Mm,
particular, has
mm.
become normalized, and nobody will say a word, either in your country or in mine, because it is. I think they are the majority now. It certainly is
Yeah,
in the UK. So, well, you can't
yeah,
say anything now, right? Because you're going to be called a name. And
yeah,
obviously the problem's going to get worse if nobody says anything. And and when I think of all the religions in the world that you might have heard of, that was the whole point of it. That they at least said, well, you have to marry before you have children, and that's it. If you can remember that, your civilization won't fall off a cliff. And
by
sadly,
and large,
um,
yep, by and
big,
large, yep.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, Claire. So some of these traditions that come from religions, they're big expectations, and the majority is going to be for the better of civilization, right? And people always want to make the exceptions, the rules, like, well, this doesn't work in this situation, and it's like, that's like 5% of the situation, the 5% of the happenstance, right? 10%, 20%, even 20%. You're ignoring the 80% where it has worked for the better.
Mm. Yes, and what you just said reminded me of the subject of O.G. Rose, which is surviving and thriving. And surviving is, yes, you can be a nation of unmarried parents and whatnot, and you can still see, well, there's still people living in that country, so there's still surviving. But thriving is order and progress, and getting bigger and better, and there is this difference. And I suppose I just wanted to disagree with Shari when she said that it's the same thing. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, Claire, I do have a question since you mentioned this, and I do agree as far as we would be better um, as a civilization, as a community, if we actually um, accepted the fact that there are choices and we're free to choose by and large, and having to take account of what could possibly be the better choice. What are the better values? What are the better virtues, right?
Mhm.
What are as far as what are the better expectations? But Claire, how would people let's say that there's a couple, they're still young, they're barely 18, they're barely, they're deciding whether they're going to continue on education or not, or if they're just going to leave it at that and just get a regular job. They got a lot of decisions to make. Do they marry? Do they not marry yet? Do they go steady? Do they kind of keep it more like a friend-ish, kind of boyfriend girlfriend-ish, kind of light? But so if someone is young, how would any of them find out what is the better values, better virtues, better expectations, better way of thriving instead of just surviving? How would they go about that, Claire? In your opinion? In your
It would
opinion?
be parental pressure, right? I mean, whether to marry or not, because if you make it the norm for men to have sex without commitment, then of course men will just carry on never committing to any woman, and women feel they have to put out and then be, horrible term, pumped and dumped, and then you have, this increasing social problem of what they call toxic masculinity. And I'm saying toxic femininity has caused toxic masculinity. If you agree with me that toxic femininity is being an unmarried mother, because
Um,
you're destroying so many lives. So the government could just say, no, we're not having it anymore. The marriage license is something we should kind of understand the purpose of, because if you're going to call it the marriage license, which thank goodness Americans still do, in the UK it's only called the marriage certificate. So what does it license people to do? It licenses people to have sex and children, right? And this at least will concentrate the minds of people, and that's all that people need to know. It's like, well, really, if you're female, you shouldn't put out. Because if you do, you are creating the environment where men think, well, I'm entitled, she likes me, therefore I'm entitled to have sex, and then they can carry on with this for, well, ever and ever, and that there will be women who, when they can no longer um, um, you know can no longer be considered marriageable, they'll wish that they had got married at the right time in their 20s. And it's too late for them. And then they'll be angry with men and hate men and blame men. And, so it is a vicious cycle, I think.
Yeah, well, this what you said is many people don't want to hear any kind of substance, anything that has to that's critical, anything that has substance. Um, However, we're still living out our lives. We're still making mistakes, whether we want to have the hard conversation or not. We still are going to make mistakes if we don't listen to the people giving us advice. And there's a phrase you said which I haven't heard much of, but I wish more people would be willing, have the courage to say it and discuss it. And you mentioned toxic femininity, because I've heard toxic masculinity all over the place. I mean, that's like by the thousands. That phrase has been thrown out there. That notion is by the thousands, but toxic femininity has not. I mean, no one is
Nobody ever
even
says it.
willing to have that conversation as far as what that might mean and what is a trade-off, because everything's a trade-off, right? How do we get to the place where we have toxic femininity influencing a lot of places and institutions? Because I do believe that that is a thing, and I do believe that it's more influential than not.
Well, it's, you see, having kind of observed how, well, the TLC in particular, there's so many sort of unofficial religions, right? Maybe Americans think their official religion is Christianity, but I don't see it anywhere because, if it were a living religion, people would say, well, they'd be accusing each other of heresy all the time, which is what, basically what Jews and ultra Orthodox Jews and Muslims do. But Christians, they don't. And I think, it's probably, a badge of being middle class, and that is what they cling to. And obviously, if you listen to the Christian YouTube, you'll see that the splinters are happening. Like, the Orthodox Christians are kind of shaking their fists at Protestants and saying, which denomination is the best, and that kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, it's an important question when you think, well, that surely you should care about your Christianity to say, well, Protestantism is the best. Oh no, Orthodox, and there must be some kind of resolution, and somebody saying, whoever, whatever it is the most powerful or something. But I uh, but I think, if your religion isn't giving you the benefit of this hierarchy and tradition and whatnot, then it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So what I find with Christian YouTube is that people just get to say whatever they want. I'm a Christian universalist. So it's like, well, you've abolished hell. Is that it? Everybody gets to heaven? Well, what does this mean? And so I chase after Luke, and Luke just runs away and refuses to talk about it. It's like, you can't just abolish hell just because you don't like the sound of it. And surely somebody should, come running after you and say, who gave you the right, who made you boss, kind of thing. So, I find that, because, organized religion built the West. I mean, this is it. Even if people don't like it, people killing each other about correct belief and being the right kind of Christian, there was formerly a kind of order when, you really did believe in it, and now it's just a cultural thing, and that's why, I get the impression nobody really wants to talk about it, because obviously they don't want to, start fighting each other and accusing each other of heresy. But
Yeah, I
you know,
think, well, some of those things maybe, and again, I'm going to give you opinion here because I could be wrong, but I think we have become very tribal, and I, I, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have to be tribal. I have the freedom to choose. I have the freedom to discern. I have the freedom to change my mind. I have the freedom to look deeper, to read more, to research. And just because somebody tells me that this person said and that person said, I'm like, and I'm supposed to take that as doctrine because this person said and that person said. I'm like, I don't think so. So if there is going to be, because when it comes to everything's a trade off, right?
hmm
Whether I listen to this or don't listen to this, whether I read these 20 books over here or 20 books over there, depending on which tribe, everything's a trade-off. Um, but I am limited to the amount of time, free time to read, right? But I do have the freedom of choice. So
hmm
whatever I think is most value is probably what I'm going to pursue. And that's, like I said, this is the freedom and I do believe that it all begins at the house. It all begins at the home. It all
hmm
begins as far as the most people that I can influence are the closest to me. So my wife is going to try to influence me, try to get me to prefer the things that she prefers, to like the things she likes, right? The music she likes, the restaurants she likes, etc. Right? The books
hmm
that she likes, she's going to talk to me about. And so I'm like, oh, I'll have to consider that one, right? I'll have to consider this author. So when it comes to influence, we have the most. So in my opinion, we are able to influence those closest to us because, well, they trust us and they like
hmm
us. Because if not, they won't be our friends, right? And so, but I do like the notion of freedom, and I am not going to be tribal. I'm not going to be doing or saying things or avoiding certain conversations because of my tribe. I I I'm the one responsible for my household. I'm responsible for me. So whenever on Judgment Day, it'll be me answering for me and my decisions and my choices, etc. So if they tell me, hey, listen to this tribe because this person in this tribe said this, I'm going to take that as an opinion, a suggestion, advice, and I only have one authority,
hmm
and that authority, because I'm a Christian, so I am biased. This answer is biased, and that's just to tell you where I'm at. Um,
No man
Everybody
can
else,
serve two masters.
well, other people are just that. It's an opinion, and the only
hmm
person that I take seriously that I will um, think as highest opinion out of everyone is Jesus Christ Himself. So Christ Jesus. So if someone's opinion contradicts that of his, then I'm going to go with his opinion. If my opinion contradicts that of Christ Jesus, I'm going to disregard my opinion and try to change my frame to fit his mold, his perspective, his notions, his
hmm
teachings, his way of showing us what the kingdom of
hmm
God is through the perspective of Jesus Christ. And anybody else who's not Jesus, the second one is the apostles. So it's Jesus first, then the apostles, and then there's everybody else. I don't care if it's a early church father. I don't care. I don't care if it's Origen. I don't care if it's Augustine. I don't care if it's Jerome. I don't care if it's a Cappadocian fathers. I don't care. The people are just people. And like I said, if they contradict what the apostles say or what they're written, then I'm free to choose that. If they contradict,
Yeah, you.
if they yeah, being a regular
Mhm.
person needing a savior, and from my perspective, my opinion, if they have an opinion and they contradict that of Christ, I'm definitely going to disregard their opinion. Full stop. That's why I don't feel the need to be tribal. I can listen to
Mm,
them. I can take their considerations, but I don't have to back up my tribe, their tribe, because ultimately, at the end of the day, when on Judgment Day, it's not it's not anybody else's doing that I'm going to be responsible for. It's going to be for my own doing, my own choosing, what I chose, what I neglected, et cetera, et cetera. But that's my point of view and my opinion, I guess.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, you have to refer to some authority, right? I mean, that's a thing. You know, that's why Christians say things like, well, chapter and verse. If you say Jesus or God said whatever, well, show me the authority. And this is a kind of thing, lawyers do. What statute, what,
Hmm.
legislation, whatever. You can't just take somebody's word for it because,
Right.
they might just be making it up.
But it is like I said, everything's a trade off. And but we are back to where we started at, as far as thriving and surviving, and how bonkers things are, where people are free to say in universities that 2 + 2 = 5, etc. Just these notions that are way out there,
Mm.
um, and
And
people have a hard time um, giving sound advice.
but
Um,
I suppose it's really a problem of liberalism, because if you think of liberalism, you think of the French Revolution, and the French revolutionaries asked for things like liberty, equality, and fraternity without seeming to realize that they contradict each other. You can't be fraternal if you feel free to insult your brother and and mock him, and through the exercise of your liberty. So um I think at the end of the day, some kind of rule system is required to ensure that people are referring, using the right authority to assert their rights. Otherwise, it would be, well, truth is just the opinion of the powerful, and then you can't argue about it, because even if this powerful person, usually the king, says something stupid, you can't contradict him because you fear to offend him, because he might, you know demand that you be beheaded or thrown into prison or have your property confiscated.
well,
And that, I
Claire,
think, is the problem. We
it wasn't that long ago,
fear
just a
abuse
few
of
years
power.
back, where people couldn't even contradict the science. Even scientists couldn't contradict the science. There was only one point of view, and nobody else was allowed to say anything. And people were getting canceled. People were losing their job, et cetera, et cetera. And that is a tyranny. That's not freedom. Um,
Mm.
you know, what I mean, it's like we're all adults
Yes, it
here.
was. I
We're
thought
all
you were
adults.
talking about Galileo, but I see that you're talking about COVID, right? Because I
Well,
mean,
it was one of many things that where people were not allowed to say have certain conversations about certain points of views, or perfect pers, certain perspectives could not even be considered or talked about, or else there was consequences. So that's like tyranny on even on free speech. You know what I mean?
well,
Where they,
yes.
yeah.
So I suppose, if Americans can't hang on to their First Amendment rights, I mean, there's no hope for the rest of us, right? You with your Proposition Nation and your Bill of Rights, and if you guys can't hold on to it, then I guess there's no hope for the rest of us. You know,
Well, the good thing is, because when I was living it, so let's rewind the clock. Let's say it was a few years back. I was really concerned because it was broad scale. It was happening in every community all across the country. So I was really concerned. But the good news is that it was so ridiculous and it was so in your face. The most regular people, and regular people are the majority, in my opinion. The regular people are the majority. So the majority of people are thinking in their mind, this is ridiculous. This is nonsense. And that movement that had a lot of popularity, that got a lot of momentums, that ended up invading, encroaching, and taking over many institutions. They pushed it so far that it was so ridiculous that it forced everybody to say, you know what, this is, I, I can't believe that we were so distracted that this happened right under our noses. And um, things have changed. Things have changed. And regular people, since they're the majority, little by little, started sta- taking back what is normal, right? Let's bring back normal, right? The outlier,
But we
let's
don't
make
know what's
the
normal.
outlier.
But I don't think we know what's normal anymore. I mean, in the sense that, is it normal to find lunatics in a lunatic asylum? Is it normal to find convicts? What kind of normal? Is normal good even? You know?
Well, there is so yes, there's many of us. So in the states, there's over 300 million. So like 325 ish ballpark estimate. So of let's say of adults, let's say half of those are 18 or above. So let's say 150, or even let's say 100 adults. If we were to survey all 100 million, we would have a certain amount of, where the circle and everything, the periphery, the outliers, the exceptions, you know what.
It's about organized action, right? I think fundamentally this is really what it's about. People
Well,
being
I
able of
don't.
organizing, capable. And if they can't organize, then they're on their own, and the government can pick us off one by one because we're not
Well,
organized. We're,
Claire.
we're isolated and
So
alone.
there is one thing. So I did learn from what happened about 5 years ago when um when the ridiculous absurdity took over the mainstream and our institutions, and they were proclaiming um, um, just unrealistic notions to the masses. And one thing that the reason why it was so that it had so much effect on every community is because even though it appeared to be organized, it was separate, and it was really, it was like in every community. And that's what I'm saying. Whether some people want to organize or not, I no longer I no longer think that that is even a necessity. Now, if it happens, great, but I'm not going to wait. I'm going to, like I said, I have I have freedom. I have agency. I have choice. So I choose to um, pick up books that are pushing the majority consensus, what's grounded in proper discernment, proper standards, proper values, so you can thrive the way communities have been thriving for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of years. I'm choosing to get educated on that notion. So, and then I'm going to try to persuade people in my close circles, like my wife, and if she has a different opinion, I'm going to try to listen to her opinion and and parse it out to see, you know, to see exactly how much of it makes sense. And then when I get my opportunity, I will share what I've learned. But I think it begins with the people that we can influence most, and those are people that are closest to us, be it our spouses, our kids, our friends,
Mm.
our you know.
But I think a lot of it is to do with our existing values and beliefs. So I think it's such a shame with Europeans because it's like from European history they lived through the bubonic plague and then suddenly they just shut down their entire economy you know uh, uh, because of some flu. And actually, I remember talking to a nurse, when the whole thing was announced, and she said, well, the flu bugs all the time, and some are worse than others, and, that the old and sick will be hurried on their way. But the mortality rate is what, 1% or something. And when you think about it, well, we're all going to die anyway, and some of us, and okay, older people, they've had their innings, and when I said these things, it's like, oh, but you're a granny killer, and I can imagine all these, families being broken up because the siblings would be saying, "You killed mum and dad because you came home for Christmas," and blah blah blah. And actually, I do know somebody that's had something similar like that. And the thing is, people are prepared to use these arguments against each other, even their nearest and
and
dearest.
and you're correct. And you know what? At least we had the opportunity to live through that experience, so we know what that type of ideology, that type of dogma, that type of seeing the world, what it looks like, and what it can do if we decide to stay silent, if we decide to avoid the conversation, if we decide to be like, I am not gonna, whatever you're saying goes against with what I believe in my point of views, but I'm not gonna say anything because I don't want I want to avoid that difficult conversation, and all I want everybody to like me. And the reality is, the harsh truth is, and like you said, Claire, there's some harsh truth, and we should be acquainted with those harsh truth. And one of those is, okay, we're all gonna die, full stop, end of story. The last time I saw a 150-year-old walking around was never, because we don't have 150-year-olds walking around, because we've been around for thousands and thousands of years, if not longer than that. But as far as I know, I've never met a 150-year-old because they don't exist. And there's some, the majority should look out for the majority, and we should make rules to help the majority. And when we start passing laws to that only benefit 5% of the population, and the majority gets negatively affected to the point where more people, more people that would not die because of suicide, because they were so depressed, because they lost their job when normally they wouldn't have, or because they got divorced, because they couldn't work, and work was something that gave them meaning, and then now they're depressed and they became alcoholics, and now they kill themselves. Like I said, it's like they everything's a trade-off. And I'm glad that we had that experiment, because I no longer I am now more open to having difficult conversations where, like, the exceptions are the exceptions, and I am not going to um, pitch my picket sign on, let's make the exception the rule. And I'm like, no, we lived that. I don't want that again. That's a ridiculous notion, and it played out horribly, and it had some horrible consequences that we don't even know exactly just how bad it was. And I'm not going to relive that. Not if I have a say so, not if I have a choice. And so
Mhm.
now I'm like, I'm going to make sure that if the conversation comes up, that I make sure that I do emphasize that the exception is the exception, and it's not the rule. We should still leave the rule as the rule. And we can study how communities have thrived for hundreds, thousands and thousands of years, what's valuable, what's not valuable, because everything is a trade-off. And avoiding the conversation doesn't yield growth.
Well, yeah, and then we feel guilty for not having said what we should have said, right? And then we think, what were we afraid of anyway? But at the time, we didn't want to stand out, and we didn't want to be called names, and then there is this guilt, and obviously it doesn't add to us, our mental health, because a lot of depression is to do with guilt, and basically kicking ourselves for all the opportunities we missed to act or speak out, or whatever, or we feel in some way pressurized. But I'm just saying, this is all to do with having convictions, and what are convictions. I mean, I'm not saying the kind of convictions that end you up in jail, but moral convictions that come from religion. And it's like, well, if you say you believe in God, then you have to think this way and do this thing, and whatever it is. And I think religion is useful for kind of getting people to say, well, you got to put your money where your mouth is. If you say if you do believe in the afterlife, then act as if you do, instead of, avoiding all kinds of things and not saying stuff and not doing stuff. So, and I think Christianity is interesting because there's so many things like, can you be Christian and not have a denomination? What does that mean? I mean, surely you have to pick a denomination.
That's a great question, and I've heard many conversations, and everybody has a, depending on the tribe, and there's many tribes in Christianity, and everybody has a certain perspective. And now the one thing is that some people say the phrases because they want to align with the tribe and they don't want to rock the boat, and they're going to say what they want, only what they think is allowed to be said. And there's other people that are more of the general understanding of the teachings of Christ Jesus and the apostles, right? Because eventually that's what it is. And so some people are less tribal and more honest and more open to say what they think without a certain agenda. And so this is what I've heard, and so I'll just kind of like summarize some of the key takeaways that I've heard. And again, it's just from my perspective, so it's just opinion based. And I could be wrong, and that's fine. I've been wrong before, but one of in the book of Acts, it mentions something about to the church in this person's house, to the church in this person's house, to the church in this person's house, and that's people. Christianity was against the law. They were being persecuted, and that's what Saul of Tarsus was doing. He was persecuting Christians. And where you would find Christian churches were in people's houses. And those people had limited understanding because some people only heard certain sermons or only remember certain things. And that was, but at least they knew one thing. Jesus is the Messiah. He came back from the dead. And what more is there to say? So they had at least the structural foundation where Jesus is the Messiah. He is, what I mean? And then Pentecost, the Holy Spirit, the whole, so at least that's what we find. Churches were in people's houses and they had different perspectives. And in the book of Revelation also mentions 7 churches, and each church is in a different locality, different town, and they have different struggles and different things that they're doing right and different things that they're doing wrong. And one of them, oddly enough, Jesus is not even within the church. It mentions that I stand at the knock. Sorry, I stand at the door and knock, meaning the takeaway is he's not inside the church. He's outside, wanting them to let him in. So
and the knock and the door will be opened, and
right,
ask and it shall be given.
But the point is that that's still considered a Christian church, meaning they can still become Christian, even though they're not Christians. They can still have the opportunity to, if they only let Jesus Christ in. Not a denomination, not a dogma, not a church father, because they're not the ones that we're saved by the blood of the Lamb, not by the blood of the church father. Or, what I mean? We're not saved by people that need a savior. We're not, what I mean? So that, like I said,
I thought that verse meant prayer. Right. I thought that verse was just saying, ask. You just have to ask. Just ask.
Well, there's like I said, the picture within the first 3 or 4 chapters of Revelation is my opinion. It gives you a glimpse into different churches that are Christian churches. And one is, they get the whole concept of Christianity so wrong, so bad, that Jesus is saying, hey, are you going to let me in, or what's the deal? You know what I mean? And so what I'm saying is, it's not too hard to be a Christian if you follow the Messiah and try to understand who he is and what he taught, and listen to what the the epistles, Second Thessalonians, it does mention, I think it's chapter 2, it mentions to follow the tradition be given via word or epistle. And the emphasis is the word or. So we have a choice via the tradition given us to by word or epistle. And Justin Martyr, every church denomination considers him a martyr, a Christian martyr, and he didn't have all the teachings. He didn't have it right. He wasn't perfect in his understanding about Christianity, and yet he's considered a Christian martyr. So, like I said, these are early examples of the way those that followed after Jesus is not, and not a particular um, tradition or person that wasn't Christ or the apostles. But like I said, this is thousands of years later, and now we have um, dogma fights and dogma exclusions and anathemas where, you know what I mean, where they are the ones that are, they're the ultimate judge. You cannot be saved unless we're saved, you know, et cetera, as if they are the
Well,
ones
yeah.
that are the saviors.
But I suppose in a way they have a point. If you're not worshipping the correct God, then or the correct God correctly, then you must be worshipping some other God. So why would you? You're not even facing the right direction. So why? How would you? Get to the destination kind of thing. And I
Right.
suppose a lot of the disagreements between the Abrahamic religions is each of the Abrahamic religions say, well, our way is the best way, and but who knows? But as far as Christianity is concerned, I think Christianity would not have become as powerful as it did become, but for the Roman Catholic Church, and therefore we Christians would have to thank Constantine for deciding to make Christianity the religion of Rome, because otherwise they would well, I mean, it wouldn't have happened, and then after, and then Europe became Christian and spread their religion to the Americas and the
Yep.
other parts of the world.
And
And
well, that's it, I believe it was in the year 312 where one of the emperors did make Christianity, uh, or they stopped the persecution, and later on it became popular. Because when Constantine becomes Christian, all of a suddenly Christianity is tolerated, and before you know it, when he starts creating churches, so when there's money involved, right? And he starts giving positions, making bishops, like a salary. So wages, all of a sudden, Christianity becomes very popular because uh, for before, when it was against the law, when they were being persecuted, it wasn't
Mhm.
about it wasn't about, oh, I can have a good job, oh, I can have a nice position, oh, I could be, you know what I mean, I could be influential. No, early Christianity, they had to live in hiding because it was against the law, or it was very unfavorable to consider yourself a Christian. And when Constantine made it popular and it started giving people salaries and started um, giving people budgets to create um, churches and to have bishops, again, it became popular and desirable. And all of a sudden, people were seeking after maybe careers more than faith,
Mm,
and
mm.
give that a few hundreds of years, and people, um, again, that's part of the Protestant Reformation, where they begin to see the big um, where things don't make sense anymore, because it seems like more people are after um, it's more like a secular way of like a career position
No,
status.
yes, as you say, a career. But I think the Council of Nicaea was interesting in that, well, before that, um, there were all kinds of Christianity, as you were saying, and I suppose I think it was called Gnosticism, wasn't it? And then Constantine said, bishops of Christianity, come to Nicaea and agree a doctrine, and I will roll it out throughout my empire. But they couldn't even agree because the Arians and Athanasians, obviously had different views of how God should be conceived of.
Yeah, we do have we have a book written by Irenaeus, of Bishop of Lyons, and I believe he wrote the book before Constantine. So before, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was afterwards, but it was early on. And he titled, well, at least the translation of the book is "Against Heresies," and where he is arguing against Gnosticism. And you're right. When Constantine, because Constantine had a lot of economic and political turmoil with his neighboring foes, and there's a lot of distractions. So he noticed that around all the communities there was a lot of debates, because now people can actually speak in the marketplace, speak and they can have these conversations with an audience at the market, because it's no longer against the law to have these conversations. And what he my opinion here, my interpretation, what he finds is this is problematic. I got too many problems. I got these foes, Constantine, right? I don't want infighting as well, and you guys are having all these debates and arguments and all. So that's why he's like, can we just choose one and stop the debates, because there's too many distractions going on, and we need there's always a foe, there's always another, there's always someone trying to take your territory, take your goods, take your women, etc. That's human history. That's what the books teaches us as far as human nature. And Arius was pretty popular, and so would the Athanasius, or sorry, I think it was.
Who was a Trinitarian? Athanasius.
Yeah, the Trinitarian. Yeah, there you go, the Trinitarian. So again, but before that, they were having debates, they were having conversations, and we're back to square one, where people are not allowed to have conversations. They want to anathemize. You don't even know. You can't even have a conversation. You can't even criticize. You can't even have a conversation. You're not allowed. You're no one. Blah. Only us. So they become, we're back to, they have become the tyrant. They have become the ruler that says, it's going to be my way or no way. And they're the ones, they want to become the ultimate gatekeepers. And it's funny because Matthew chapter 23 was Jesus not staying quiet and giving criticism to the institution that had deviated from the true concept that was given once upon a time by Moses and Abraham. All the, as far as what it meant to be a believer. And Matthew chapter 23, the whole chapter is about Jesus giving pushback to the institution. And we're back to square one, where
but I don't know if you've heard of the edict of. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. What were you saying?
Well, I gotta do a bathroom break, but go ahead and keep talking. I am listening, but I'm just gonna mute my mic. I'll be right back.
Okay, I'll talk about the Edict of Thessalonica then, which was passed in the year 380, basically saying that all Christians in the Roman Empire had to be Trinitarians or else. So I can read that very short entry on Wikipedia. I suppose I'm very interested in these subjects because this is not common knowledge amongst Christians, and I think it's very important in our understanding of Western history, and and that is basically the history of Christianity. So let me read the Edict of Thessalonica. Passed in 380 by Theodosius I, made Nicene Christianity the state church of the Roman Empire. It condemned other Christian creeds such as Arianism as heresies of foolish madmen and authorized their punishment. The edict addressed to the inhabitants of Constantinople, whom Theodosius wished to pacify in order to make the city his imperial residence, constitutes the first known secular law which includes in its preamble a clear definition of what a Christian Roman ruler considers as religious orthodoxy, opening the way of repression against dissidents qualified as heretics. The Edict of Thessalonica was subsequently incorporated into Book 16 of the Theodosian Code and was a milestone of the official Christianization of the Roman Empire. Background. In 313, the Emperor Constantine I, together with his eastern counterpart Licinius, issued the Edict of Milan, which granted religious toleration and freedom for persecuted Christians. By 325, Arianism, a school of Christology, which contended that Christ did not possess a divine essence of the Father, but was rather a primordial creation and an entity subordinate to God, had become sufficiently widespread and controversial in early Christianity that Constantine called the Council of Nicaea in an attempt to end the controversy by establishing an empire-wide, that is, ecumenical orthodoxy. The council produced the original text of the Nicene Creed, which rejected the Arian confession and upheld that Christ is true God and of one essence with the Father. However, the strife within the I'll just finish this last paragraph, though there are more. However, the strife within the church did not end with Nicaea, and the Nicene creedal formulation remained contentious even among anti-Arian churchmen. Constantine, while urging tolerance, began to think that he had come down on the wrong side, and that the Nicenes, with their fervent reciprocal persecution of Arians, were actually perpetuating strife within the church. Constantine was not baptized until he was near death, 337, choosing a bishop moderately sympathetic to Arius, Eusebius of Nicomedia, to perform the baptism. I'll stop reading now because there's quite a lot of it to go, but I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, and that I guess it brought an end to the debate, or so they thought, because when Constantine did perish, he left his kingdom to his three sons, I believe, and only one of the two were Trinitarian. The other two, and as a matter of fact, the one that outlived, because the other two, because they wanted all the territory, I think it was Constantine, the one that took the grandpa's name, that emperor, that survived the other brothers. He was not Trinitarian, and so that's why. And like I said, and he did evicted. I don't know if that's the right word, but he or maybe fired bishops and put in non-Trinitarian bishops. So it was like the whole restructuring of order in those days, and that's why. And even sometime afterwards, so went back and forth because I know because I know that when they had the Second Ecumenical Council, it was Trinitarian again. But like I said, it wasn't steady because later on, I think it's in the year 500. Sorry, memory is not the greatest. You get uh, Maximus the Confessor, the one that was speaking on behalf of the Trinitarians, and he was um, silenced. They uh, um,
Mm,
they they cut his right hand because he was writing a lot of letters, and they
mm,
also cut out his tongue, and he didn't survive the wounds. But yeah, they definitely did not want conversation. They definitely did not want,
no.
and this is like I said, um, I that's why I do believe that Jesus meant when he says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give what is God's." And when you have Caesar ruling over the church, that's when you get muddy waters because when you have Caesar, you also have everything that Caesar brings, which is politics, which is enemies of that are outside the kingdom of Caesar, and you have economics, and you have all these other things that um, businesses, right? So it goes with the economics. So it muddies the waters because then you have people pursuing religion for status reasons and for wealth, for monetary gain. And that was not how Christianity was established. It wasn't established for status and it wasn't established for monetary gain. But when you mix Caesar with the church, that's when, in my opinion, the muddy, that's when the waters get muddy.
But I suppose I feel that there's no difference between religion and politics because, you know, all the buttons are pressed of rage and pride and, all the other things. So in a way, the differences are, non-existent because even if atheists say we don't even believe in God, they they're actually saying our own beliefs are, sacred to us, and therefore, that's why they fight each other. So in the end, people will, even atheists will fight each other to the death, about some political disagreement, just as religious people would kill each other over some theological disagreement. Because in the end,
Well,
it's about, right and wrong and good and evil.
well, we've have had where two non-religious countries fight each other. So you don't need religion to fight with one another because what we have is human nature.
Hmm.
Whether you are religious or not, you still have human nature, and human nature is has to be contended with on a personal level, or it's gonna and even if you do have control over that, you still have the neighbor to contend with. So, like I said, even with two non-religious countries, they still want they would still want resources, and they still want status, and they still want wealth, and they still want comfort, and they still want what they want. The problem is, um, human condition says, well, it is never enough. When is enough status? As the person that has a lot of status, what he wants more, he doesn't want to lose the status that he has, and he wants more status. What about the wealthy person that has 5 million? Well, he's not going to stop at 5 million because he can have more. And the person that has 10 million, well, he can still have more. And you get to the point
Well,
where what about 5 billion?
yeah. So if you have a moral system, it will say you have to share your resources. You mustn't go to war, um, or at least you mustn't go to war at the drop of a hat. And if you do go to war, there's certain rules that you have to observe. You mustn't kill non-combatants. That kind of idea, really. And I suppose, talking about the Romans, the idea was that. Well, I think that I don't know if they actually practiced it, but it was sort of like, well, you surrender immediately, and things won't be so bad for you, and we'll just run your country better than you would yourself. You don't have to be, so scared. And people might think, okay, since it's the Romans and they're so powerful and they run their country so well, maybe we won't fight them so hard. But if the Romans had said, well, we're going to come and kill you, and we don't care, what you say, we're just going to come and kill you and take all your things, then of course you would fight them harder. So, it's all about, at the end of the day, making promises and keeping them. And if you keep enough of your promises, people will say, maybe the Romans aren't so bad. Maybe it would be okay to be under their imperium kind of thing.
Well, Clara, I think it's more than just that. And I'll give you a quick example. And like I said, maybe this is opinion based again. That could be wrong, but I'll give you an example. When the USSR collapsed, they had control over, they had their tanks and their influence over the part of Yugoslavia or Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. And when they left that territory, tribes appeared really quick, and people trying to get control over resources and land and area, etc., and wealth. I mean, it happened. And as far as that territory, which was one territory, supposedly Yugoslavia, we no longer have Yugoslavia, and there's been a back and forth. And even if you do have a set of rules, if you're Montenegro, or if you're Albania or something like that, if you have your order, you have your rules, and you think you're being fair. If, again, I'm not saying that, I'm just giving names to put some perspective that's actual with specific. So let's pretend that we have a specific area, territory, small territory, and you set your rules, and it's fair, and everything's good. Guess what? You're still surrounded by people that have different ideas of what is desired, and people still contend for more and more and more wealth, more territory, more status, more this. And you know what? What if they decide they want your stuff? And you're like, but you don't get it. I have fairness here. I have, my community likes me as a leader, and everything's fair. The neighbor, if they have more tanks, they're going to be like, I don't care what you think. I don't care if you think you're fair. I'm going to take your stuff. And the reason why I'm going to take your stuff is because, one, I want it. And two, you have less tanks and you have less power. So you won't be able to stop me. The example I give is Genghis Khan. You're not going to talk philosophy to him. And, as if you're going to say a nice phrase, nice philosophy, he's going to change his mind and be like, oh, Genghis Khan changed his mind. He's not going to invade our town because I was able to talk some sense, because my philosophy is good, or my ways are good because I'm fair. Genghis Khan was not having it. And so we have many real life examples of people getting invaded because other people just want their stuff.
Sure. So it's about managing your empire. At the end of the day, you have to, ensure your armed forces are, defending the country properly, and you're not hated as a government, that your army depose you as monarch and it becomes a military dictatorship. And I suppose kings have all these things to bear in mind. They have to make sure that the priesthood is on side, and the ordinary people, the rich people, the priesthood, and all that. So I guess it ain't easy, but if you have rules, then you might just follow them. It's better to have rules than not to have rules. So even if people break them, at least somebody will say, hey, you broke the rules, and you broke so many of them, and we don't think you're a good guy anymore, so we'll have to get rid of something like that. Because what are the 10 Commandments but a list of rules? That was a beginning, right? And Lisa said, well, it's from God. It was given to Moses and it's from God. And it's like, you can't get any higher and we better follow it. And the Jews are still around. And I guess Christians and Muslims, that they get their religion from, the commandments given to Moses on Mount Sinai, because they can't deny that story. That is the thing, because it's so powerful, and it was a first divine revelation given to humanity. And so, Christians and Muslims diverge, in saying that, their way is better, but we can see a certain pattern there. But I mean, it's like the propositionation of the American Republic, because I guess the founding fathers were saying we don't want no king, just kicking us around and taking our stuff and signing our death warrants and throwing us in jail without even explaining what we did that was wrong. I mean, habeas corpus was something, very hard won. And, sadly, a lot of these things are being, forgotten about, or not considered very important. And yeah, I mean, I suppose I talk to Americans because I think, they're the ones who started this constitutional republic thing. And if they can't keep their republic, it would be very sad. And I think a lot of it is basically, to do with, do you really even believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished? And that, I think, is a baseline of moral conviction. And recently I thought, well, actually, you can shame all these atheists. It's like, you don't want to believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished. Why wouldn't you want to believe that this could happen? And obviously, if you want to believe in it, it's only logical to believe that God exists to do all these things, because it wouldn't be logical to think these things are going to happen on their own without, some directing intelligence. And that's why the Hindus and Buddhists are not being, terribly logical in a way, because they, well, I mean, okay, they don't have divine revelation. That I think is their problem. They don't have divine revelation, and they assume that reincarnation happens automatically, without referring to some, supreme power to do these things. Well, I guess the Abrahamic religions, well, it's logical anyway. And I think, the more logical your belief system is, the more likely you are to believe in it and take it seriously. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I do.
Oh,
My opinion is we do need a set of rules and boundaries and ideals and morals and ethics and standards. And we do have choice. And then if we do think we have choice, then there's the quality of choice. What is the better choice? Do we understand the why behind the things? And we have the freedom to choose what we pursue. We have the freedom to choose to reconsider. We have the freedom to choose to change our mind for the better if we
mm,
want to. We have
mm,
to, we have choice. And while people are busy and distracted and trying to figure it out, I'm not going to wait for someone else to do it. I'm going to start with me, and I'm going to start in my
mhm,
household, and
mhm,
hopefully other people begin to hear these concepts,
mm,
and that way they can decide for themselves, and they can
yes.
research it for themselves, and they can
Mhm,
reconsider. But like I said, I used to wait for other people to bring change, and I was depending on other people deciding for me, or if this, but I I don't do that anymore.
yeah, if
I
you
am
want to do
limited.
something, to do it yourself.
Yeah, I
Or
do
if you want
have
to
limits.
put it done
Yeah,
properly.
yep. I do
Yeah.
have blind spots. I do have limits, but
Mm,
I mean, I'm only
oh,
responsible for myself, because I can persuade other people, but I can't change them. I can't force them.
mm,
So I'm going to start with me.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm going to look up the references that you mentioned, and hopefully we'll speak again before too long.
All right. Well, thank you for joining in the conversation. And like I said, you did mention a few things that I don't normally hear. And I don't know why other people would want to avoid those kind of topics, but I'm glad you were able to share some of your ideas. And until next time,
Thank you, Alex. Take care. Bye.
bye.